The iPad is an integral part of my everyday life. It's the perfect middle ground between my laptop and my phone in terms of portability, screen real estate, and functionality. And for someone like me who is deeply invested in the Apple ecosystem, it just fits. Now recently I did a full revamp of my iPad setup, so today I want to walk you through that setup. But first let's talk about the actual iPad and the accessories that I use on a day-to-day basis. Now I have the iPad Air 4th generation. This is the one that was released in 2020. I got the space gray version with 64 gigabytes. The first accessory I'd like to talk about is the Apple Pencil. If you're a creative or a student or just someone who enjoys using a stylus-like accessory, I would say that this is a very useful tool to have. You can use it for note-taking, annotating documents, illustrating, designing, editing. Maybe you enjoy games like Sudoku or crossword puzzles that just feel more natural with a pen and paper type setup. It's comfortable to hold, you can replace the tips if they get worn down, and you can also get different accessories to improve the grip. This one connects magnetically to the iPad for charging and storage. Now using the Apple Pencil on the iPad screen feels a lot more natural and more like writing on paper if you have a matte screen protector. Now I know there are popular ones from brands like Paperlike, but I just went on Amazon and got a generic matte screen protector and it works really well. Finally, let's talk about the case. I am currently using a trifold case from a brand called ESR, and it is, as you can see, in this gray colorway. I really like using these trifold cases because I can fold the front cover and use the iPad in different angles depending on what task I'm trying to accomplish. Now let's talk about the philosophy behind my setup. If you watched my What's on my iPhone video that I posted earlier this year, you'll be familiar with the one-page setup that I like. When I got this iPad, I decided to just use a similar setup. Since then, it hasn't changed at all. It's worked well for me, but I think I've just gotten tired of it, and the second thing is that I honestly don't use my iPad in the same way that I use my phone. So the first thing I decided to do was remove all of the applications that I just don't use on the iPad. The next thing that was in desperate need of a refresh was my wallpaper. Now I knew that I wanted to go for something very simple and minimal. I'm really into browns and neutrals these days, so I knew that that's the aesthetic I wanted to go for. When I couldn't find one that I really liked, I decided to just make one of my own. I used an app called Procreate to do that, and we'll talk a little more about that app later in the video. Now, as I was deciding how to redesign my setup, one thing that was helpful to ask is, when I pick up my iPad, what am I usually using it for? And I came up with a few main use cases. So taking some inspiration from one of my favorite YouTubers, Tom from Byte Review, I decided to try something a little different and have dedicated pages for each of those use cases using focus modes. Each page consists only of the applications and widgets that I use the most in each of those categories. So let's take a closer look. First, let's quickly look at the lock screen. As you can see, it's very simple. I just have some widgets on the side here. We have the Google Calendar widget that allows me to see my month at a glance. We have the weather. This is just from the default weather app. We have the world clock, as well as the battery widget that allows me to see the battery status of different devices, whether it's my AirPods, the Apple Pencil, or any other accessories that I connect. Unlocking the device, we're taken directly to the main home screen. Now, the idea behind this home screen is I wanted to make sure that I have all the apps that I'm most likely to use when I pick this iPad up, as well as some informational widgets that are useful to have at a glance. So let's talk about the widgets first. At the top left, we have this one from Widgetsmith. Now, Widgetsmith is an application that allows you to create your own widgets. I have a few that I've created here. This one is the clock widget, so that's just, giving me the time. I know that you can see that in the status bar, but I just like having a better view of it here on the home screen. We also have the weather again, Google Calendar. We're going to come back to this one at the bottom here, but if we go up to the top, you can see I also have the world clock again, the batteries, and then this one is also from Widgetsmith. It's just a photo that I got from Pinterest that I think adds to the general aesthetic of this main home screen. Now, if we look on the bottom left, this is a shortcuts widget, and these shortcuts will take me to the page that corresponds to each of these specific focus modes, and we're gonna see how that works in a bit. But first, let me talk you through the applications that I have here. The first one you'll see is Notion. Now, I have talked a lot about Notion in my previous videos. I use Notion as my second brain. It's essentially a workspace that you can use to organize and collect your thoughts, ideas, create databases. So if you're interested in seeing how I use Notion specifically, I highly recommend checking out my Notion setup video. The next application we have is GoodNotes. Now, this is a really popular note-taking application. I think, if you're a student or or somebody who needs to take notes for any reason. Now, this is GoodNotes 5. GoodNotes 6 was recently released. I think they've actually moved on to a subscription model, if I'm not mistaken. As you can see, it's really customizable. You have lots of different tools that you can use. You can change the color and the stroke size of your pens. You can add images, stickers, you can use shapes, highlight. lots of different things. So if you're into note taking, if you need to annotate documents or anything like that, I'd highly recommend checking out GoodNotes. Day one is my digital journaling application. I have mentioned this as well in another video when I'm just trying to, highlight a specific part of the day that was really memorable, or, if there's something unique or interesting that happened, I will usually create a quick entry here in day one and attach maybe a photo to it. So it's always nice to go back in here to see different moments of my life highlighted. You can create different journals. They also give you daily prompts that you can use if you're looking for something specific to write about. Freeform is an application that I've been using a lot more recently, specifically for brainstorming video ideas for YouTube. It provides you with sort of a never-ending space to write and illustrate on. So I think this is great for brainstorming, coming up with new ideas, and just jotting things down. As you can see, you have different tools at the top here. You can add text, you can add images if you wanted to. We have Apple News, which is my preferred news application at the moment, especially because I am subscribed to Apple News Plus, so I like to have this on the main homepage to encourage me to use it. We have Pinterest, which I like to use for inspiration, and then of course YouTube. I think that's also pretty self-explanatory. Next we have Google Keep, which is my application of choice when it comes to jotting down quick notes or lists. Google Chrome, which is my preferred browser. Spark for email. TickTick, I have spoken about TickTick in previous videos. This is my preferred to-do list application. It allows you to do so much, from adding to-do lists, creating new lists. There are so many different features built in. There's a calendar. There's also a Pomodoro timer that's built in. If you have the premium version of this application, there's just so much more that's open to you. Then we have Safari. If something is not loading properly in Chrome, I'll usually go into Safari and see if it works better there. Messages, Spotify, which I use for my music streaming as well as podcasts. And then here we have a shortcut to the app library. Now the next page is actually my reading page. If I click on the reading shortcut here, you can see that it takes me straight to this page. This focus mode has now been activated, and if I wanted to go back home, I could simply click home. I have some widgets here on the left, so let's go through those. Here I have a widget from an application called Readwise. Now Readwise is what I use for highlighting specific content that I like to save from books, articles, newsletters, and this widget refreshes constantly with the different highlights that I've created from that content. So as you can see here, this one has brought me a highlight from the book Cosmos by Carl Sagan. I highly recommend Readwise if you are somebody who really takes highlighting and collecting and commonplacing seriously. Now it is a paid service and there's a light and a full version. I do pay for the full version just because I get so much value out of it. Now below that we have two smaller widgets. The first is a word of the day shortcut. This one is actually just one that I got from the gallery. Now this one uses Merriam-Webster to give you a new word every day. And then next to that I have a Notion widget that takes me directly to my Resonance calendar. Now my Resonance calendar is a database that actually syncs with Readwise so that I can have a central place for all of my Readwise highlights as well as any other highlights that I create outside of Readwise. And I find this really useful to reference if I just need some inspiration or if I wanted to revisit a specific source. Below that we have our shortcuts to the focus modes again, and then let's talk about the four applications that we see here. The first is Readwise Reader. So this, as you probably would have guessed, is a companion to Readwise, and it is essentially their own Read It Later application. My Read It Later application of choice was Pocket, and I was using Pocket in conjunction with Feedly, which I use as my RSS reader. And what I love about Readwise Reader is that I can now have both of those unified into one application. So if we click on Readwise Reader, you can see that this is my inbox. So these are articles and content that I have saved that I would like to get to later on. So that's the Read It Later aspect of it. We can also look at the feed. And so what I've done here is I have gone in and added specific sources that I want to see from time to time. So I have some websites like Aeon and Long Reads. I also have some newsletters as well. So if we go into newsletters, you'll see Morning Brew, Sunday Snippets from Ali Abdal. We also have Sidekick from Morning Brew, Dense Discovery, which is perhaps my favorite newsletter, if we're being honest. Now next to that we have the New York Times app. I recently bought a subscription to the New York Times. I am really trying to get back into reading more long-form journalism, staying up to date on current events, reading columns and things like that. So I thought it was important for me to sort of support and subscribe to one of my preferred publications. So I'm going to be testing out the subscription to see, if it's really worth it for me. I've also been inspired by a creator on TikTok who has really been trying to get people back into, reading newspapers and, reading long-form content. I'm going to have her somewhere on this screen here.
My name is Kelsey. I'm getting Gen Z back invested in the print media to help with their emotional regulation. Just your media literal hottie that's going to help you decide what print media you want to get invested in.
Encouraging people to stay informed and, stay in the know. I think that's really important. Apple News, we spoke about that earlier, but I want to show you, some of what you get with the Apple News Plus subscription. I just really like having access to all of the magazines and publications that they have in their catalog. As you can see here, these are some of the ones that I am interested in. The New Yorker, New York Magazine, Essence, we have Time, The Atlantic, and there's so many different newspapers and other publications in their catalog. I think that having access to all of these publications for just $9.99 a month is good value, for me at least. And then of course the Kindle application if I choose to read any of my ebooks on my iPad. Now the next page is my creativity page, and again, similar setup with our widgets and apps. If we look on the top left, this is from Pinterest, and this is just giving me highlights from my feed. So that's great for just sparking inspiration, looking at different designs. Below that we have two smaller widgets. The first one is a widget from Notion that takes me directly to my video project tracker database, and the next one is a widget from Teacup, and this one links directly to my YouTube project. So as you can see, the two things that I have to do, I have to film, this video, and then I have to film some B-roll for it as well. And then let's talk about some of the creativity applications that I use a lot. Canva is an absolute must-have for me in terms of graphic design. There's so many different templates on here, so many different types of documents and visuals that you can create. Procreate is a digital illustration application. Now, I wouldn't consider myself an artist per se. I'm not really skilled when it comes to, traditional art, drawing, painting, but I found that Procreate is really useful for any sort of illustration that I might need to do. Maybe it's, creating graphics for my YouTube channel or editing my thumbnails. Like I said, I used it to create this very simple wallpaper that you'll see on my home screen. We have Freeform again, which I spoke about before, Figma, which I use for creating wireframes and mockups, YouTube Studio that I use of course to track any analytics for my channel, ChatGPT. I know that there's been a lot of talk about using AI tools in the creative process, and I think that AI is sort of here to stay, and so we might as well find ways to use it in our workflow. So I try to use ChatGPT when it comes to creating titles for my videos, for example, or creating descriptions. I use it mainly for inspiration, and then I will tailor the output that I get from it to my specific needs. Next to that, we have Ultimate Guitar tabs. I am a hobbyist guitarist, sort of self-taught, and every once in a while I'll hear a song and I want to learn how to play it, and so this is where I will access my tabs. Now, Lake is interesting in that it is an application that you can use for coloring. I find that this is very useful for, just relaxing, doing something creative in your spare time. As you can see, there are some illustrations that you have to pay for, but there are also some free ones. If you are looking for an application that really just allows you to disconnect and do something creative and maybe take you back to your childhood days of coloring books, I would highly recommend Lake. The final page in my setup is my media page. The first widget you can see here is from one called TV Time. I spoke about TV Time in my What's on My iPhone video, and this is an application that I use to keep track of all the TV shows that I watched. If we go into Love is Blind, for example, oh my goodness, I don't even know why I'm watching this season. It is probably the worst season in the history of this show, but the drama sells, so I'm actually up to date on all of these episodes. I'm going to go ahead and check those off. Now, the widget next to that is a really cool one from an application called MD Vinyl. So this essentially shows me what I'm listening to currently on Spotify. It also allows you to sync with Apple Music if that's the service that you use. And then the really cool thing is that it gives you this nice visual that mimics a vinyl on a turntable. So I really like that. It really adds to this home screen, I think. There are also different visuals you can add. So if I select MD vinyl, you can see you can make it look like a radio. You can also just have a regular layout with the album artwork and the name of the artist and the song. And then you can have the one that I currently have on my home screen, which is that vinyl. Next to that, we have a Spotify widget that allows me to get back into anything that I was listening to, and then again our shortcuts. And then below that, we have some applications. We have Netflix, Hulu, Prime Video, YouTube. SofaScore is an application that I use to check the scores for different sports. And then Genius. I am somebody who listens to a lot of music, and lyrics are an important part of that. So I always like to be able to go in here and then, just look up the lyrics of a specific song. And then, see if there's any specific meaning behind certain lyrics, for example. And that is essentially it. If I ever needed to access any other applications that I maybe don't use as often, I could always just quickly access the app library and go through them here. But like I said, those are my main use cases, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how this new setup works for me. So that is my complete redesigned iPad setup. If you enjoyed the video, remember to leave a like, subscribe, comment, and let me know if there are any apps or widgets that you think I should try. As always, I am eager to hear from you down in the comment section. Thank you so much for watching, take good care, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.